you mentioned, and I'm not recommending that people take their 10-year-olds out on ride-alongs and show them dead bodies and stuff, but you were exposed to significant trauma at a very young age. Did you find yourself, what coping mechanisms worked for you as you got older? Were you able to really compartmentalize it and just kind of keep it on the back burner?
I think so. I don't know why or how, but generally things, there's super sad things and tragic things and horrible things that occur, as you know, and I was able to not focus on them. I remember my dad, one of the few pieces of advice he gave me was, don't focus on the stuff, do your job. You go to a fatal accident and you see horrible things or a shooting or some dead child. You have a lot of things to do. You have a lot of notifications to make. You have a lot of responsibilities there. And so I think the fact that I focused on doing the job instead of dwelling on it, the matter at hand, I think helped. It might just also be a little bit of the function of my personality as well. I don't know. Never drank to excess or anything like that. So maybe I'm lucky to a certain extent that, I never really fell into like a PTSD trap necessarily, or, got totally salty as a way of pulling away and stuff like so many people do. So I was pretty lucky. I wish I had a better answer. Might be nature and nurture.
Welcome to the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantiani. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So let's get into this. Tell me, where's hometown for you? Where'd you grow up?
So I'm an Orange County guy for all my life. I grew up in Santa Ana till I was about a dozen years of age, and then started to go downhill in that town a little bit. It started to get a little bit rough, so my folks decided to move us to Irvine, which is where I went to high school and ended up living until I was an adult, and then most of my adult life has been in Huntington Beach.
Big family, small family?
So I've got two younger brothers, a really intact nuclear family. My mom and dad, who've now passed, they're great people, and then just three boys is all they had. Never had a girl, and I was the eldest. So for all the good and bad that comes with just boys.
Depending on which parent you talk to is probably a good thing. Depending on which parent you talk to is a bad thing.
There you go. Exactly right. Exactly.
Mom and dad, what did they do for a living?
So my dad was actually a career law enforcement guy. So he spent his whole career in the city of Santa Ana, which was pretty rock and rolling back in the day. He started in 67. I think before they even had a police academy or a very irregular police academy at Orange Coast College. He hit the streets before the academy. They gave him a penal code and said, go to it, kid.
Go learn.
Exactly. So he did that. He did it for 30 years. And my mom was like a legal secretary. And then she decided she wanted to get in the business. So she also found her way into Santa Ana PD. Just worked as a meter maid to get her foot in the door. And then she ended up being an accident investigator as a civilian and then a sex crimes investigator. So I guess you could say it was probably destined for me to follow the footsteps.
Did you know as a young boy that was where you were heading towards? Or as a little kid, what was kind of taking up your interest in your time?
Well, like most boys, cops and robbers is a thing, right? So of course, and then, I'd hear my dad come home and tell stories, and I was pretty intrigued by it. Aside from sports and all that, playing with your friends, I felt at some point I would probably end up in that career. It was just so fascinating to me. And then at some point, he ended up taking me on ride-alongs, which was unusual because I was about 10 years old when those started. So if you can imagine,
3 phone books so you could see over the dashboard.
Exactly. And seeing stabbing and shooting victims and stuff like that. Probably stuff that I shouldn't have been exposed to that early, which might, explain why I'm all screwed up now.
Puts hair on your chest.
It did more than I needed. So I did that for quite a while, and then it only reaffirmed, the desire to be in that career.
Did your brothers also follow in that?
We couldn't be any different. I have one brother who's a propeller head. He's a computer guy. He's done that his whole career, and he's been at one place, steady Eddie. And then the youngest one ends up being a chef. So a cop, an IT guy, and a chef. Couldn't be any different.
From your dad's perspective, did he want or was he pushing law enforcement on you and your brothers?
Never did. Never did. He always said, if you want to be a trash man, be the best trash man that you can be. And so they were totally supportive. I think, obviously, he was proud that I followed him, but there was never any pressure.
What about academics and sports as a young kid?
Always a good student. I was in what they called mentally gifted minors back in the day. Now it's GATE, or if they even have it anymore. And then I played Little League baseball and those kinds of things. And then up until high school, and then I was into volleyball and stuff like that. So moderately athletic, but certainly not the star of the team kind of a guy.
Nothing that ever came along that would have potentially been a diversion to take you away from the law enforcement path?
Well, I had a few jobs from starting, from age 16, and I just kind of frittered away at this and that, and enough to probably know that I didn't want to do those things. I did a little construction, worked in a restaurant, I worked in a furniture store, and this is really what ended up pushing me to make my decision. Finally, I was doing well at a furniture store, doing some sales and stuff like that, and they said, hey, we'd like to think about moving you into some kind of a management role. And I said, well, now is the time. I need to make that call. So I said, I got to try something else first. And so I did, and it stuck.
Did you go to law enforcement right at 21?
No, 23. 23. I think I started interviewing probably late when I was 21. And then by the time I got hired on and hit the academy, I was 23.
And what year was this that you went into the academy?
I went in 1987.
And you worked and lived or worked for the agency where you grew up. Was there ever any reservations about working for that city?
Actually, I didn't. So I thought about working.
I apologize. You grew up in Irvine.
Right.
Okay.
And I actually gave strong consideration to being in Santa Ana, which is where my dad worked, but then I wanted to be my own man. So, for the people that loved him, it would have been a tall shadow. And then for others who didn't like him, then I would have had to overcome that too, right? So I decided
blessing and a curse to kind of follow behind either brothers or fathers.
Exactly. So I decided to basically whoever would hire me first, and it ended up being the city of Garden Grove, which ended up being a good thing. So it was in Orange County. It was a very active city at the time, and so I was really glad that I started there anyways.
Going back to your dad, did he promote through his time into a higher ranking position?
So he was kind of a career sergeant kind of a guy, which lets me know that he was smarter than I was, because I promoted above that, as I think you did too. To me, the best job in the police world is probably that first level supervision, where you still have some active involvement while supervising others. So he stayed there. He was probably a sergeant for 20 years and loved every minute of it.
What I was getting at is I came into supervision later in my career. One of the regrets that I have is not kind of taking that leap sooner, because you kind of get into that mindset, I still want to be a worker bee, or I want to, but you can actually do a lot of good for an organization. And from your dad's perspective, was he encouraging you to promote, or did that kind of come on your own?
Kind of came on my own. It had nothing to do with my dad. Although we were both briefly working together at the same time. In fact, we did some high-risk car stops when I found stolen vehicles and trailed them into Santa Ana. It was kind of cool for us working together on the street. He was pretty hands-off. So, as I mentioned, not really encouraging me or pushing me to be a police officer. And then he wasn't the kind of guy to give me career advice either, or to say, hey, you really need to promote or anything like that. My folks were just both very supportive people. And would have been happy with whatever I chose. So probably could have been more hands-on in some ways and giving advice and all that stuff, but it's just the way it was.
Did you know going in the door that that was going to be a career for you?
I thought it was. Yeah, I thought it was. It wasn't a job. I thought it's a true vocation, a true life-changing kind of a thing, and that I could do good for others. And I felt comfortable with it right away. I felt this is a great fit, and it turned out to be so.
Did you know, and I've asked this previously, so did you have a kind of a career path mapped out in your head for what you wanted to accomplish? And did it pretty much go according to plan?
I had no plan. I remember a guy in the academy who ended up being chief of police who, when they asked, what is your goal? He said, I want to be chief of police. I was like, wow, who would want to do that, first of all? And then what vision to have? For me, I just wanted to get on the streets. Didn't want to be SWAT necessarily. Didn't want to be the canine guy. Didn't see myself as the detective. I just wanted to get out on the streets. And of course, that's where you start. So I was a happy guy. And then I ended up, getting specialties and moving around later on.
When did the interest to promote come in?
By that time I lateraled to Huntington Beach PD. I did 5 years in Garden Grove. Then I went to Huntington. I'd done several specialty assignments, and then, you start hearing it from peers and supervisors, hey, you should really promote, you have what it takes, it'd be good for the organization and this kind of thing. And so I kind of begrudgingly did it. And the old adage that, do you really want this guy or this girl to be supervising you? Right. And that kind of hit home to some degree when you
No one's ever heard that before.
Right. So when you saw some people who you didn't think were the greatest being promoted above you, that was a little bit of an impetus as well.
You ended up retiring what year?
I retired in 2014.
At what rank?
Lieutenant.
Was there ever an interest to go higher than that? Or did you know that now this is as far as I want to go?
I don't think I really wanted to go to captain level, which was the next level at our department. At one point, the chief brought me in and he said, hey, thinking about the organization and your future, I'd like you to be one of my captains going forward. And I had said, Chief, I see your captains, they're all miserable. I said, they've all got GERD, and I don't want that. And he says, you don't have GERD? And I said, no. And he goes, well, maybe we could be not as rough. And I go, no. I really like having the filter between you and me of the captain level. So I was pretty happy, and he took that well. I mean, it wasn't an antagonistic thing. He heard what I was saying. And so I was happy to retire at that level.
Did you enjoy your career the whole time? And I know this is kind of a loaded question, but in the sense that, was there ever a point where you seriously considered maybe not doing a career?
No, I loved it from the minute that I jumped in there, seeing all the things that happened. I mean, as somebody once said, it's like you're working in a carnival and cops get in for free. And it's true. I mean, the things that you see on a regular basis are pretty amazing, good and bad. And I really enjoyed that. And I felt that I had an aptitude for the job, was reasonably successful. And so once I got in there, I knew it was going to be, for my whole career. I really enjoyed it.
As you were coming towards your end, did you start making active plans for your second career?
It's kind of weird. It's almost accidental. At the time, I was an investigative bureau commander with Huntington, and just happened, I saw some flyer about a wine class at the Montage in Laguna Beach, which is a beautiful resort. Happened to fall on my days off. I had no particular aptitude or any more desire about wine than anybody else, but I thought, maybe I'll go and look at the waves and have a little bit of wine on my days off, and what could be bad about that? And I did, and it changed everything.
Were you and your wife into wine at that time?
Not in particular. We were just like anybody else, probably just like you and your wife or what have you. No expertise, occasional weekend away, maybe Paso Robles, maybe Temecula or whatever, something like that. But it was nothing that I really thought that I would need or had a desire to pursue. And then it shocked me more than anything that all of a sudden I was falling down this rabbit hole.
What specifically about that event kind of really drew you into it?
So it was really more of an intellectual thing, I think. Over the 2 days, I kind of learned that California wasn't the center of the wine world, and it kind of intrigued me. I go,
don't ask the winemakers that.
Right, exactly. And they had, we spent about 45 minutes over 2 days about California wines. The rest was France and Italy and Spain and everything else. So I thought that was kind of amazing. And at one point, at the very beginning, there was a blind tasting. They put white wine in front of all of us, and they said, "Hey, who wants to take a stab at what this could be?" And I, of course, had no clue, so I was keeping my mouth shut. And this guy behind me, he goes, "I'll try." He goes, "Okay." He goes, "It's Old World," meaning Europe. He goes, "France, Loire Valley region. The grape is Chenin Blanc. Appellation is Vouvray. I call this as a 2010 Vouvray." I go, "Wow, what was that? That's pretty cool. I didn't even know what a Vouvray was. I barely knew what a Chenin Blanc was. Where's the Loire Valley?" So a couple things just kind of intrigued me, and I go, "You know what? This is pretty cool. I think I'll take another class." And then once I kept taking classes, the hook set deeper. And all of a sudden I was super intrigued and learning, and it's a fun field of study if you think about it, right? You're tasting wines and discussing them, and it's not a bad thing at all.
Was this class meant to be the stepping stone to get into the wine industry, or merely just, hey, come learn more about wine?
Could be either. A lot of these people were in the restaurant business. I remember one guy had purple fingers because he had just worked in Napa Valley, making wine up there and stuff. So most people were in the restaurant or wine business already, or retail perhaps. And so there were very few people like me who just went and said, I think I'll go and have a glass of wine and check it out. So, it was kind of, I was one of the outliers, you might say.
And how soon or how far from retirement were you at this point when you started with these classes?
So I was a couple years before I could pull the plug. So let's call it maybe I was 47 or something like that. And you could, in our system, pull the plug at about 50 if you wanted to. I planned to work at least until that time. Had no notion of working for anybody else. I thought, like most in law enforcement, that maybe I'd have a risk management career, or, do something that would be smarter than what I ended up doing, because, using my training, education, and experience, that I had was probably the smart play, but I ended up doing a passion play instead.
When did you know that this was going to be your retirement gig?
So at some point, I learned about this place where I currently work called High Time Wine Cellars in Costa Mesa, and everybody was talking about it. The staff's knowledgeable, the place is amazing, and all this stuff. It's one of the greatest wine stores in the world. So I found myself going there and going to tastings to learn, and I thought, this is kind of cool. And so I ended up trying to work there part-time after taking more classes, and they wouldn't have me. What's a cop know about wine? Why would we do it? And I learned later that they thought that cops probably don't have enough flexibility to adapt to a family-run business without a lot of rules and regulations. And so they were a little bit leery for that, which I get. But I persisted. And I still didn't know I was going to make it a career. I just thought, this would be kind of cool. I'll spend a day a week here if they'll have me, get on the floor and get to know more about wine. And then eventually I persisted enough and offered myself as an intern to work for them one day a week. And they said, wow, that changes everything. And so
we can get free labor out of you.
Right. Who wouldn't take that? So they did. And so I ended up working one day and somehow did well on that first day. And they go, wow, that's pretty good. So I came back the next Friday, which was a day off. And at the end of it, they said, we like you. You're doing a good job. We're going to pay you. So I worked 2 free days. And then for the next year and a half, I was a lieutenant with Huntington. And then on the Fridays, And then sometimes more on the holidays, I would come in and work the sales floor.
Once you got in on I'll call it a more permanent basis, did they have a specific course of instruction that they wanted you to learn?
That's the funny thing about a family-run business. The answer is no. I think, thank goodness, I was able to adapt from the massive rules and regulations that, I was trained in to more of a figured out kind of a scenario, and it worked well. I liked the freedom of it, but really it was more like, kind of like when my dad started law enforcement, like, okay, good luck, do your thing. And that's kind of how it was. But to be fair, if I had questions about anything, any product or any process, somebody was always there to assist. But basically there wasn't a lot of structure. There still isn't, which is good and bad. And so, again, it's family run. And so you take the good and the bad, and almost all of it's very good. It's been very positive.
When you came to your actual retirement date, did you know that you had a full-time or a guaranteed job there?
I did. We had some discussions, and they said, hey, whenever you can retire, we'll take you full-time whenever you want to come. And so right when I hit 50, I retired, and then I think I took a week off, and I jumped in with both feet.
What, for that period in your life, what were they wanting you to do? Was it merely just be a salesperson and kind of being a voice of advice for somebody coming in? Or did they have a long-term goal for you? Or did you have a long-term goal for yourself?
No long-term goals on either of our sides, really. It was, let's see how it goes. And I don't think they expected me to do as good as I did, and maybe I didn't either, but it was more or less, the job was to be on the sales floor and help anybody who comes in, hey, Paul, what would you like? And, you want an Italian wine, I'll go help you with an Italian wine. If you want Cabernet, I'll help you with that or whatever. And then, stocking as well and all that. And honestly, we still do that. Everybody in the store still stocks, and it's good because otherwise I'd be fatter than I already am. And so it's good, keeps you active, and, lifting those 35-pound cases all day long while you're selling and while you're doing everything else is a good thing. So had no aspirations initially. And then at some point I started to get ambitious again and decided that, I'd like to be a buyer. But this is a place where some of the employees have been there since the 80s, and they don't give those positions away. And fortunately, I ended up doing pretty well in my arena, and I was asked if I wanted to be the French wine buyer, which is a very good job in that store. And of course I said yes.
Going back to the law enforcement bridge for a second, once you were out, did you ever have any, I'll call them fallback, whatever you want to call it, where like, oh man, I made the wrong choice, I shouldn't have left law enforcement this soon? Or were you glad the day you walked out and kind of put it in your rearview mirror?
Saying it that way would seem like I was unhappy with my law enforcement career, because I wasn't. I didn't end up burned out. I was very proud of my career. I was happy with it. I felt like I did good, enjoyed it, and I don't regret a minute of it. But I'm kind of one of those guys that I turn the page, I think, fairly well, for better or for worse. So if I'm done with something, then I move on. Doesn't mean I don't still have friends there. Doesn't mean I still don't think about it sometimes, or there's times when I would want to jump back in occasionally and do something. But once I left, I focused on my new assignment or job or chapter, and I didn't really look back. I had offers, like we all do, if you've been in the business long enough, that, hey, if you want, we've got this job for you, and those kinds of things. But I never really looked seriously. I knew there was a fallback if I wanted it, but I kind of knew, just like with my law enforcement career, that I was happy, and barring something strange, change in ownership or something, I was going to enjoy it. One
of the things I like to talk about is the importance of not making, especially, whether it be military veterans or first responders, not making the job, the badge, that be your identity. It sounds like for you, as much as you enjoyed the job, you struck a good balance in, that's just my job, that doesn't define me. What things did you do, or did you make an active attempt in your career to say, that's just my job?
It is the hardest thing to do, really, isn't it? And everybody told you for your mental health that you should probably develop outside interests and all that. And it's very true. And I did have plenty of friends, and do have plenty of friends outside of law enforcement. In fact, one of my regrets is probably not keeping in contact with as many people from my old career as I do, or as I should have probably. But I still, talk, text, see them, go to lunch occasionally and stuff. But I think I was able to separate it good enough, but sometimes you felt the pull, you're getting calls at home about a case and all these things. And, if you have informants, then sometimes that's a 24/7 thing, right? So it's easier said than done. But I did my best to maintain some of that separation. And likewise with this current career, it could be a little bit consuming, as silly as it sounds too, because you're getting calls and texts, and you're going to wine dinners and stuff. And it sounds like drudgery, right?
Yeah.
So
horrible. If you need a stand-in, I know somebody.
Exactly. So, but I did, going back to law enforcement, I did try to maintain other interests and friendships to keep me sane.
Well, you bring up a good point, because you kind of put it on yourself to say, I haven't done as good a job to kind of maybe stay in contact with as many people as I could. But that also goes both ways. And I think back to some recent social media posts and stuff, and where people talk about how you have to remember that the day you walk out the door, as much as you may love this job, you're out of sight, out of mind. And so it's an equal part, in the sense that develop yourself, plan for your retirement, be able to walk out that door, but understand that as much as everybody's going to say, hey, we're going to miss you.
Yeah.
When you walk out the door, you're out of sight, out of mind, and it's easy to kind of forget about you.
That's a valid point. And even within a particular assignment, when you're still in the law enforcement career, I remember, my track was gangs. And so I thought I was doing a great job, of course. And I remember when I left thinking, well, nobody's going to be able to do it as good as I did, false pride. And maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but they had a different set of eyes and ideas, and they did some things better than me and some things that I thought they could have done better on. And then you translate that to leaving your career, and man, I thought I did a great job for the department, and kind of a legacy and all this stuff. And the beat goes on, and it's a little bit tough to realize in a way that you're replaceable, but you are.
You mentioned, and I'm not recommending that people take their 10-year-olds out on ride-alongs and show them dead bodies and stuff, but you were exposed to significant trauma at a very young age. Did you find yourself, what coping mechanisms worked for you as you got older? Were you able to really compartmentalize it and just kind of keep it on the back burner?
I think so. I don't know why or how, but generally things, there's super sad things and tragic things and horrible things that occur, as you know, and I was able to not focus on them. I remember my dad, one of the few pieces of advice he gave me was, don't focus on the stuff, do your job. You go to a fatal accident and you see horrible things, or a shooting, or some dead child. You have a lot of things to do. You have a lot of notifications to make. You have a lot of responsibilities there. And so I think the fact that I focused on doing the job instead of dwelling on it, the matter at hand, I think helped. It might just also be a little bit of the function of my personality as well. I don't know. Never drank to excess or anything like that. So maybe I'm lucky to a certain extent that, I never really fell into like a PTSD trap necessarily, or, got totally salty as a way of pulling away and stuff like so many people do. So I was pretty lucky. I wish I had a better answer. Might be nature and nurture.
And that's the perfect answer, because the one thing is we can't compare ourselves to somebody else. I like to ask the question more because you might have thrown out something that you did that somebody just might not have been thinking of. But at the end of the day, I think that's the psychologist's job to figure out why one person is more impacted than the other. And who knows? Like I said, it may be nature and nurture, but I was just more asking if there were, in the sense that, hey, you know what? I used to do this. And somebody like, oh, I didn't even think about that. So yeah, I don't think there is a wrong answer to it.
I think trying to live your normal life, going back to what you said before about having other outside interests or spending time with your family, getting away, completely removing yourself from the environment, going on vacations, just doing something different rather than just dwelling on the matters at hand, I think is helpful.
So going back to the wine world, when you first kind of dove off the cliff and really got into it, was there a region of the world that immediately captivated you as far as wine?
Well, like all of us from California, at first, that's the thing everybody thinks about and knows best, right? But as I mentioned in that first class, I learned that they were not the end-all, be-all. And I soon found that my palate actually reflected an old world palate, meaning less alcohol, perhaps, less fruit only, and a little bit more complexity and balance being kind of the buzzwords. And so I found myself gravitating towards France, Spain and Italy, but especially France, which ends up being where the greatest wines of the world are, in my opinion. And so it kind of led me down that way. And so then I was starting to focus on that, and they noticed that I had a desire and an aptitude in that arena. And that kind of led to the next step, which was being offered the French buyer's job at High Time. So I think obviously I went down that rabbit hole of the complexity of France and the greatest wine. So it just, everything happened so organically. It was pretty cool.
So going into the realm of being a buyer, what changed for you? I mean, it sounds, and I hate to overgeneralize it. It sounds simple. Just go buy the wine, but there's got to be so much more to choosing the wines than, and what did you have to learn to be able to do that?
So it's to your point, it's not splitting the atom, but I think you have to figure out what people want. So there might be things that I like, and I hope that my palate is good enough that it's going to translate to the people at large. But you have to be aware of what everybody else or what particular segments are going to want. And so there is floor space. There's a little bit of a budgetary concern. There's representation in each category in every region, different grapes, different producers, getting to know what sells, what doesn't sell. And I saw some of that when I was just working on the floor before being a buyer. And some of it's on the job and you make some mistakes, but it's not really like a shoot or don't shoot thing or what have you. It's maybe something, the inventory lasts a little longer on a particular item that you didn't do a great job on. Maybe you shouldn't have bought as much of that, or it's priced incorrectly or something. So I think it was a little bit of on the job and listening to people, listening to customers. And I think that's where my strength has been is seeking out things that people want and realizing what are the must-haves. And so I tried to develop high-end clientele within the store and to feed that need. And so, it has an impact when you're selling $10,000 bottles. Yes, we're going to sell the $10 bottles too and everything in between, but it doesn't take too many of those super high-end ones. And then, you start to develop a reputation as a go-to place for a particular genre, whether it's, obviously I'm talking French, but somebody could say, hey, I do a great job in Italian and I've elevated the game or what have you. So that's kind of what I've tried to do. And, there's a lot of things that go into it, of course. Just thinking about it and listening.
Well, I think you bring up a great point in the sense that you're buying for a store that's providing to a a small geographic area and understanding what the customers in that area want. Because I think one of the things that can easily kind of creep in is there is this image of people who are involved in wine have a pretense about them. And so I could see from the flip side, the store saying, this is the wine that's the best. This is what you're going to buy. And it doesn't matter if the customer doesn't like it.
It's true. My wife would say that I'm pretentious at times too, because I'll turn my nose up at a lot of wine when we go out to dinner or something like that. I'll just grab a beer depending on the menu and stuff. So this is a true thing. And I think you were asking something before that, leading up to that, but I don't remember what your point was.
I was just talking about were there any additional classes or anything that you had to, whether it was required or you just felt, you know what, I need to go learn this a little bit more before I actually go to France and be a buyer?
Yeah. So I continued taking courses to deepen my knowledge, and I read books and all that and traveled. But really the on-the-job experience is really where it's at. You're surrounded by experienced people in the business. I know you mentioned like a local business, but we sell throughout the United States too. And we're actually well known. Some of my best clients are from New York, a couple of Texas billionaires. I've got a client in China. I've got a great customer in Canada. So yes, we serve a small geographic area, and that's the bread and butter because we're still a very great walk-in store, but we also have great customers and clients throughout the U.S. and beyond.
And is it from the people who are out of your geographic area, are they coming through your website and then basically, I'm looking for a French wine, the company puts you with them, and then you start working directly with them to try to figure out what would be best for them?
So there's actually a search engine called Wine Searcher. And so somebody who has their favorite wine and they're sitting in Alabama or Georgia or whatever, they can plug it in there and see who has it and then price compare as well. And so if we have the right product at the right price, a lot of times it'll lead to us, and then that'll begin a relationship. And sometimes, I'll reach out to them and, hey, thanks for that purchase. That was a nice $10,000 order or whatever it is. And then talk to them and say, what else do you like? And kind of start to build that relationship. And then when I start to get some of those cherries that come in that are rarities, I know, hey, this guy, Bob, likes this one. And so every vintage that comes out, he's going to be offered these. And then so-and-so likes this other kind of wine. And so all of the greatest wines that I get, I almost already know where they're going for the high-end ones. And so I think that's been a positive thing for me in the store.
Was it intimidating to go on your first buying trip and be in France, kind of in a small fish in a big pond?
I wouldn't say intimidating, but I did go with a fellow employee who'd done it before. And so once I was asked to be the buyer, he said, hey, let's go to France. And so that was kind of cool to get an overview of some of the processes and the regions and meet some of the players over there. But every time I go to France, I meet new people and learn new things. And typically now I go about twice a year and to different regions and I'll tour properties and dine with the winemakers and owners. And it's an ongoing process, but I don't think I felt intimidated, just like I don't think I felt intimidated in law enforcement at the beginning either. Yeah, I realized that I didn't know much, but I felt like I could learn it. I didn't think it was beyond me.
Got the in essence, the backing or the support from your boss to, hey, we have confidence in you, go forth and prosper.
They've been amazing in that, actually. Sometimes I'll tell the owner, hey, I've got this large purchase I'm doing, $250,000 or what have you. And she'll say, you going to sell it? I said, yes. She goes, great. And so she and they don't really hem me in, and they give me great freedom and enough rope to either hang myself or to make it through. So they've been great with me, and it's worked out well. The freedom has been amazing. I'm very aggressive in my buying. I perhaps even buy more than I should. I'm not afraid to, and it's worked out very well.
For somebody looking to get into this, what would be beyond potentially being a wine buyer? Does it go towards, now I'm just going to become my own store owner or distributor?
You could, but if you wanted to be a store owner, then you're going to need some serious capital to do that, right? And partners. There's no question. I mean, just our inventory at the store is
a lot,
many, many millions of dollars, right? So you would need that. You could also work for a distributor or an importer. You could work at another retailer. So you could work at a restaurant. You know, you could all kinds of different things. But I think I found my niche.
Is what you're doing, what's the difference between that and being a sommelier?
It's a great question. Nobody understands. So to me, sommelier is the guy or girl who works a restaurant in particular. Often, they're the ones that are the snooty ones, perhaps, right? But, walking around with the napkin draped over the hand and all that stuff and making suggestions. And I'm mocking them, but they do a great job. To me, sommelier is particular to a restaurant. And when I was continuing my education, I could have chosen to go down that path, a service path, rather than what I felt was more apropos to what I was doing at the time and continue to do. So you can take different branches, there's different organizations and all that. So I feel like I have a lot of the knowledge of a sommelier. I certainly drink enough good wine and taste enough wine to know perhaps more than most sommelier. But the people at the top of that game, like that you see in the movies, they're very impressive. They're very dedicated. They've spent a lot of time refining their talents. So I respect that. But I just have a different focus, right? My job is to figure out what will sell, source it, bring it in, price it correctly, connect it to my customers, and repeat. And it's a different function, I think, than theirs to a certain degree. We have a different business model, but yeah. So I wouldn't consider myself a somm, but I have some of those skills.
You mentioned it previously, the person who was able to take a taste of a wine and not only identify the country of origin, the grape, the terroir, I think is what it's referred to.
Yeah.
And I know I've seen that done in movies and in documentaries.
Sure.
Have you gained enough to where maybe not 100% of the time, but a good majority of the time be able to get in that ballpark?
Sure. So these classes that I've taken, a large component is, in addition to book work, is tasting and tasting blind. And so you learn to recognize with a fair degree of confidence, the things you're talking about. You don't always get it all the time. Even the master somms don't get it all the time, but you could do pretty well. That being said, I think it's a perishable skill. Like in my old career, some of those things that you learn, if you're not practicing it, then you're going to get a little bit rusty on it. And so for me now, I'm not as strong as I was because I'm not taking those classes at the moment. Now my job is to identify typicity. From this region, with this grape, this climate, and this terroir, this is what I expect to taste and smell from inside that bottle. And if you're bringing me that and it doesn't meet those criteria and the price is not good either, it's not coming in the store. So now I taste for typicity as opposed to blind tasting. So if I've got that Loire Valley Chenin Blanc, it should have screaming acidity. It should have notes of quince and bruised yellow apples and all these things, right, that I look for. If it doesn't, it's not going to make it.
We've all been in that position of somebody saying, hey, taste this or whatever, you're going to smell this and this is what you should smell. I know in my own experience, and trust me, I am nowhere near any level of being able to speak educatedly on wine. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. How do you develop that ability to smell a given whatever it is?
I think it's repetition, and the classes that I had from a master somm had a great influence. They helped me to kind of formulate a tasting systematic plan where I could pick apart a wine pretty well. And, you kind of know Does it have this or does it not? Does it have this? Does it not? And so you can kind of go systematically, like in a heartbeat, just smelling something and kind of dial that in. And lots of times I know what it's going to taste like just by smelling it right off the bat, just because of repetition and tasting enough wine and studying enough. And then same thing, then, you know, when you taste it, it's confirming it, or it's going, well, the nose doesn't meet the palate, and which could be an issue too. So I think it's just a matter of practicing, you know, and getting good at it. And some people are maybe better at it than others. And I don't claim to be a super taster. I think I'm good, but there's people better.
You mentioned previously that your wife might even joke that you're a little bit pretentious now, and you'll kind of, nope, I'm just going to have a beer.
Yeah.
The longer you're in it, do you find that there's less and less of the entry level or lower level wines you're even able to enjoy anymore?
100%. And that is sounding super snobby. It really is. So I'd rather drink quality over quantity. So my idea of enjoying wine is going with similar minded, maybe not people in the business, who really appreciate the finer wines, to a great dinner, and ruminating over these glasses and bottles of a wine over a lengthy dinner. And as dorky as it sounds, it gives me great pleasure to do that. And so yes, when I go to a neighbor's party and they say, you know, I've got the $12 Kendall Jackson Chardonnay, do you have an IPA? You know, that kind of a thing. So yeah, I don't want to waste my time with some of those things. I need to know lesser priced ones just to help people, and I do, and I taste them at the store. But on a personal level, no, the game is definitely elevated on that.
You bring up a good point about the enjoyment, the social aspect of enjoying a nice bottle of wine over a nice meal. But from a purely learning about a wine or truly evaluating a wine, if this is your first time going towards a bottle, should you do it over food, or should it just be the wine by itself?
It's a good question. It could be either. I mean, if you're at a restaurant and a somm suggests something and you're adventurous, why not? Most wine is meant to be paired with food. So that's not a bad place to be. But I think who you're with kind of matters too. So I think you kind of play to the level that you're surrounded with sometimes. And so, you know, you maybe aren't going to learn too much, and maybe it's not your goal to learn really, if you're just going to grab a bottle with dinner and stuff and just enjoy it and not think about it like I do. So, and that's okay. You know, that's what the majority of people do. And most people, instead of aging their wine, will take it and drink it in the first week when it should have been aging for the next 5 or 10 years. And that's okay too. So it's whatever
At
makes
least
them
let it
happy.
climatize.
There you go. It's whatever makes them happy. So you could do it either way, really. There's value in just having a glass of wine at home or with food.
The documentary Sour Grapes.
Uh-huh.
What impact has that had on the industry, the lingering impacts of it?
You know, I still get questions about, you know, how do we know this is authentic? I had a guy grill me a few weeks ago on a first growth Chateau Margaux. How do we know it's real? What was your sourcing? What kind of security features are on that bottle? What are the laser codes that are, you know, embedded in that and stuff? And so he made me jump through some hoops, which is good because I always learn when people do that. It's still lingering, especially at the high end, which is where I play a lot. So, you know, those expensive bottles, there's a reason people will forge those, right? There's a good return on the money. And so it's definitely a thing for me to be aware of as a buyer too, right? Making sure I source correctly, that I have confidence in where it's coming from, as opposed to some Johnny on the street, you know, walking up in a suitcase or
Pops the trunk on his car. Want to buy some wine?
It happens. Believe me, it happens. So yeah, it's a thing, but it's good because people before were being duped, and I think now people had their eyes opened a little bit, and there's still stuff going on out there. I'm sure of it.
As an industry as a whole, did they adopt any new practices because of that? I would imagine, though, that's not the first instance of significant fraud, though, in the wine industry.
True. Yeah, it's been ongoing for quite a long time, but I think that really brought it out into the open for the consumers as well. The producers have been the ones really who have taken means to do it. You know, they'll put certain capsules that'll show you if it was tampered with, or they'll put something that showed if it was exposed to heat, then a little color dot will change. Or they'll put some microcode on some of the expensive bottles on the labels and indicia on the corks, all these things to kind of combat that as well. So, but it's mostly the fairly high-end ones that have really done that because they were the ones that needed to.
And I've had couple other guests who are involved in the wine industry, and one of the things I ask about, because I think you're fighting the stereotype, or not the stereotype, but the perception of a real cork, a synthetic cork, or a screw top. But I've had several of them tell me that, you know, with a screw top, you can actually control everything in that bottle much better. What are you seeing from the European winemakers? Are they adopting more of the screw top?
I think some would like to, but the consumer's still not ready. I mean, there's two countries, Australia and New Zealand, that have adapted it in a big way, and 95% of what they sell has that. The lower end in the US does it, of course, but you're right. It's actually better for a wine, and you can actually dial in different screw caps that will allow a certain amount of air ingress and egress to simulate what a cork would do, because there's naturally a little bit of exchange that occurs in a cork. And so you could dial it in specifically, but people are not ready for it. They don't want it. They turn their nose up at it and stuff. So I don't see it changing in a big way, especially for high-end wines. It's just tradition, and it's what people are used to.
You mentioned when you first went to that very first wine class, and they spent, in the grand scheme of things, a very small amount of time on California wines. As somebody from California, when you went over to France, did you find that you had to kind of prove yourself a little bit more? Were they looking at Californians kind of the same way, like, oh, you really don't even know wine?
Not really. I don't think so. I've never gotten that. And of course they're motivated to sell to me, right? And to keep me happy. But I've never gotten that at all. They're curious about California wines. Sometimes the stuff they get is not of great quality that gets shipped over, so it's not a great representative. But I think that's changing a little bit. But clearly they feel that as a country, for example, the country that I visit most, they feel like theirs is the best. But I'm not disagreeing with that. So as long as
they've been in the game a long time,
they have. As long as you're humble, I think you're good to go. They didn't look down on me at all. I mean, it's more of a knowledge thing. So the difference between when I started and now is significant, and so I'm sure they would look at me in a different way now versus then. You kind of prove yourself, like in anything, right? Any career that you have.
We've talked about California, and obviously the more time that goes by, there's more regions that are growing in California, not only growing grapes, but growing in size.
Sure.
Are there any other regions in the United States that are really kind of exploding that maybe a lot of people don't know about?
The Pacific Northwest is an exciting area. So Oregon, a lot of the French actually have bought or partnered for wineries up in Willamette Valley. So Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, it's a little bit cooler climate. It's not as hot as California, so it's kind of a nice transition. They do great. And then Washington State itself does some very nice work with other varietals as well, Cabernet, Merlot, Syrah, et cetera. So I think the Pacific Northwest, in addition to obviously Napa, Sonoma, and all that, are super exciting areas.
For somebody wanting to get into this business, you mentioned that first class, but if you could go back and do it over again, what order or what would you do as far as classes, like first to last?
So you have to start at an entry level class, whether it was the one that I did, which was the Court of Master Sommelier, or WSET, or whatever organization. You have to start there. and then just see if it's something you like. And if it doesn't, then you pivot and you do something else. If you like it, pursue it, read, talk to people, find your local wine shop, talk to knowledgeable people, surround yourself with them, and then progress accordingly. Just keep on going and learning and tasting. And it's a passionate thing. Wine is a passionate endeavor. And honestly, I felt my old career, I was very passionate about too. And I think these are two different careers that I think somehow translate in a way. The stakes are significantly different, but I had passion for both careers, still do. And so I think if you follow your passion, that'll guide you. Passion, like anything else, right? Passion and focus, it's really the name of the game. If it's something where you get up in the morning and you're excited to go to work, whether it's law enforcement or being the best damn truck driver you can be, or in the wine business, if you love it, it doesn't feel like you're working. So, yeah.
Are there specific schools that you can recommend?
Yeah. So the one that I've really learned the most with was the Wine, Spirits and Education Trust, WSET. And it's an England or a UK-based organization, and they have little chapters all over the place, including one in Orange County here, which is obviously where I learned, but they have LA locations and that kind of a thing too. And so again, you have classroom and book and blind tasting, and then, darn homework, kind of a thing. So
go drink this bottle of wine.
Exactly. And so that happens all the time. People come into the store, hey, I'm taking this WSET class. I know you've been through it before. Can you blind pick me out? Here's my budget. Pick out a case of wine for me. And then, so I can study it. And so that's what people do when they're into it. They form tasting groups to further their skills. And that's super beneficial too, and just following your passion in that regard.
What's the cost of classes?
It depends on the class, but let's say you're taking a 10-week class. I don't think it's prohibitive. You have to pay for the wine as part of that. Let's call it $1,000 for 10 weeks going once a week, something like that, which is well worth it. And then obviously there's all the ancillary stuff if you're actually following up on your own and buying wines, and that can add up, of course.
Kind of along the lines of, like lawyers, where they have to have continuing education. Once you're in the industry, are you required to keep up with a certain number of classes every year, or is simply just being on the job enough?
Just being on the job is enough. And in fact, I find that it kind of precludes me from spending as much time studying as I'd like to. If you're into it and you're doing a good job, then it's more than a full-time job in a way. So yes, I probably should keep doing it, but the on-the-job education that I get every day is amazing. I have French winemakers, Italian, Spanish people who fly in just to see us. And, if I'm curious about this wine from Australia, say, hey, do you mind if I jump in? And then I'll taste a whole lineup of different wines and learn and talk to these people. And so there's really, as you know, on-the-job experience is probably the most valuable. And so I get that on a continual basis, which is great because you can get narrowly focused in your own thing. And it's good to go, oh yeah, I haven't had the new release of this great one from California. Let's see what that 2020 vintage tastes like, or what have you.
In wrapping it up, anything else you can, I'm looking at it from the education standpoint, what somebody can do to better their knowledge. You mentioned some books. Any books or last minute advice that you could give?
So I did things like the Wine Bible. And let me just digress here a little bit. So social media is kind of a big deal too. You can actually learn a lot on social media too. Some of these wine critics, they will actually walk the fields and show themselves in a video and explain different things, from the growing the grapes, the harvesting, the winemaking and stuff like that. So I think now people should also immerse themselves in social media for the purpose of learning as well. But yes, there's heck, the Wine Bible and anything made by WSET, the Court of Master Psalm. There's all kinds of online courses, WSG. There's all kinds of fun stuff, and you just kind of keep on digging down that rabbit hole. But truly, it's more of a function of letting your passion and focus take you, and then just kind of follow that. There's so much now online that you could source. Go to classes, go to tastings at your local wine shop. Do a deep dive if it really interests you. Talk to people like me, talk to people that you know in the business, and then decide if it's something that's right for you, and maybe study with them, maybe share a glass of wine with them and chat about it.
Do you know of any specific YouTube channels off the top of your head that you could recommend?
I don't, but if you went to like some of the players, like some of these master psalms, you'll find videos of them, on there, sometimes from Sour Grapes, that kind of a thing. But I don't really, subscribe to any particular YouTube channels, but when I'm curious about something, if I'll Google it, maybe it'll take me to YouTube, maybe it'll, take me to an episode on Netflix or, to a book or what have you, but not a particular YouTube channel.
Well, I appreciate your time. I wish you all the continued success.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.